Good morning, Arlo, and thanks again for joining us for yet another installation of our continuing webinar series. We've got a pretty exciting topic today. We are going to be covering our blended learning, and we've put together a couple of case studies here. This has been one of the most sought after topics since we first started doing our webinar series, so I'm excited to help kind of map out what this looks like for a couple of Arlo clients. And we've got a couple of great guest speakers here this morning. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ben Holiday. I'm the customer success manager here at Arlo for the greater APAC region. So joining us today, we've got two guest speakers, as I mentioned. First and foremost, we've got Craig Smith coming to us from Positive Partnerships in Australia. He's the national coordinator there, and it's a government-funded program for helping children with autism. We'll let Craig jump in and kind of provide a little bit more of a substantial introduction here in a moment. And later on in the program, we've got Paul Naybour coming to us from the UK. He's representing Parallel Project Training. He is the co-founder there at the business, and they've got a very interesting use case here in that they've been implementing blended learning for the better part of the last decade. And so between Craig and Paul, we've got kind of the full picture of blended learning, and excited to share their case studies with you guys. At this point, I'd like to get right down to it. Craig, if you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of background about yourself and the business you're representing.
Yeah, fantastic, Ben. Thanks for having me. I'm Craig. Nice to meet you all in webinar land. I have been a school teacher in schools for children with autism for around 15 years now, and I have always been interested in the education side of things with regards to technology, and I've now worked with Positive Partnerships, which is a federally funded national training organisation with a focus on training families, training schools in understanding good autism education practices, with a focus on that partnership. So not just exclusively teaching parents or exclusively teaching teachers, but really bringing them together to learn from each other. And those are free workshops that we run around the country. And I guess, as we'll talk about, we've always had a big focus on the face-to-face component. We fly our people around the country, and that has changed recently, which has given us a really interesting opportunity to build a more hybrid model, which we're excited to talk about.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Craig. And yeah, it's fascinating the journey that you and Positive Partnerships have been on, and kind of, you know, the silver linings that have really been brought front and center as a result of the last couple of months. And of course, we'll dive into that here in a second. Just a quick thank you again for taking the time out of your day to join us and help walk through your journey with Positive Partnerships, and especially with respect to the blended learning. So let's go ahead and dive in, Craig. Why don't you take us through your story?
Yeah, fantastic. So I just mentioned our focus, which is on that education provision. We deliver face-to-face workshops across Australia, from the metro right through to regional spaces. So we go often to where training does not always go in Australia, right into the middle, up north, up to some of our islands above the mainland as well. And we've since 2017 in our current project. I mean, we've been running for 10 years, and we sort of run in iterations of 3-year projects as we are funded for those. But in our current phase, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've presented around 543 workshops to close to 17,000 participants across the country. Now, we also deliver online webinars and online learning modules, and we have always had those up there. So we've always had online learning opportunities for people who cannot always get to a face-to-face workshop, and we host those in our learning management system, which is Learnbook, which is like a skin for Moodle that we have online. And we see around 2,000 active users a month who get online to do our modules. Sometimes those are people directly connected to our face-to-face workshops, but they're also just people who are looking for online learning. And they can be from Australia, and at the moment, increasingly, they're from around the world as well.
That's awesome. And Craig, before we proceed beyond kind of this overview of the scope of positive partnerships, I'd love for you, Craig, to kind of expand a little bit further on what have been the repercussions, and particularly the positive side of that has come out of the COVID-19 environment.
Absolutely. So when we started to get a sense of just how serious things were going to get with COVID, we immediately announced a shutdown of our face-to-face workshops for the sort of future 2 terms. So we cancelled term 2 of the school term in Australia, term 3 of the school term. We said we just can't book any venues and anticipate giving face-to-face workshops during that time. So we immediately had to pivot to other ways of giving that content to people, because it was still being requested, and the conditions changed because our families of children with autism were suddenly educating at home. Our teachers in schools were suddenly going to online learning, and they had a lot of questions around how to support kids on the autism spectrum at home and via online learning. So what we did was quickly pivot to webinars, which we thought was one of the first things we could really start to offer as a substitute for face-to-face learning. And we used to run monthly webinars, and we would maybe get, say, 50 or 60, 70 participants for the monthly sessions that we'd run. But we changed during the COVID period to running 3 webinars a week. So we'd run 3 different sessions: a morning, an afternoon, and evening session across the week. So maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, to give people a chance to hop on and do that. And we created new topics, or we adapted old topics to really speak to the current moment. So they were things like learning from home, on online learning. What does the sort of tech look like in this space? What's the good pedagogy? Right through to now that returning to school. And we've had webinars where we've had 500 people register. We're filled up, then the wait list has become 500 people. Then we've had to move those to extra sessions. So we have seen more numbers coming through our webinars and our online learning. There was one day there where we were getting almost 1,000 people an hour logging on to do our Introduction to Autism module.
That's such a fantastic response from your already existing audience, and the fact that, I think the volume alone speaks testimony to the power that you guys are offering to potential clients and students. So glad to hear that you guys have managed to see such incredible success throughout these really trying times. And we spoke about this briefly the other day, Craig. Obviously, being able to run these webinars online and offering your e-learning activities and that sort of stuff really allows to expand the scope beyond the borders of Australia. Obviously, as we did discuss the other day, you mentioned a handful of countries in the greater APAC region, but also on the other side of the world that have been tuning in for webinars and e-learning. So obviously that would not necessarily be possible or nearly as feasible or practical without the ability and the platform of Live Online and LearnBook.
Absolutely right, Ben. And it's something that we never really actively advertised for. Like we are very much an Australia-focused project, but as you say, like we saw many registrations coming in from Indonesia, the Philippines, schools there who were seeking extra support and content for their learning. We've had schools log in from Germany. We've had some local councils in England sort of logging on and accessing resources and asking for more support. So it really has turned into a global affair within a fairly short span of time, because that's not our regular audience, but this just changed the game completely.
Well, I'm going to assume that you've gone ahead and brushed up your Indonesian and your German skills, Craig, and I won't put you on the spot to give the audience a sample. But yeah, let's go ahead and proceed through your story, Craig. Thanks for sharing that for us.
No, that's great. So I guess this is our website where people can log on to. This is sort of our front-facing place that people first see us. We have our information about workshops on here, but also opportunities to connect to our online learning hub for that online learning. So that's just a bit of a sampling of what people see when they first log onto the site there. And then I guess this is really the start of the journey, the sort of user journey that some of our users could go through. So we've got, I guess, these three main stages, and I guess in future slides, I'll sort of break this down a bit more and we can have a bit more of a chat. But the broad overview is that we offer, as part of our face-to-face workshops, we offer pre-workshop tasks for people to complete. Now that expectation can be slightly different for families compared to educators. We know that families do not always have lots of time to sit down and do as much as perhaps school teachers might get a chance as part of their day. So we have these pre-workshop online modules that we offer. Those are very theory-based. So we're trying to give families and teachers the opportunity to get some really good theoretical understanding of autism before they come to the workshop. And then they come to the workshop. We run face-to-face workshop days, and then after the workshop, they have post-workshop tasks that we have inside a digital online classroom for them to complete. And those are very reflective tasks. So we feel that we start with some theory, we move on to practical face-to-face interactive tasks, and then we finish with reflection that sort of leads on to learning from there. Okay, so this is just a bit more of our user journey, a bit more in depth, I guess, that we start with our website. Our workshops are advertised up on the front page of our website, because all that is controlled through Arlo, the registration process. So we pop our workshops, our webinars into Arlo, and then those are pushed onto our website. We then have our registration that people complete. So when people have registered for a workshop, they get their face-to-face workshop details from Arlo. And at the same time that they receive the face-to-face workshop details from Arlo, they're automatically also enrolled in LearnBook. So we've got a plugin in our LearnBook learning management system that was authored by Arlo. And so that allows Arlo and LearnBook to talk in a way that users don't have to separately then receive instructions for having to register for our online task. It's just a single fluent process that they register for the workshop and they get notified that they're also enrolled in our online classroom. And then when they receive that information, they can then log on to do some pre-workshop tasks. So we've got our modules that we've authored in Articulate storylines, or their SCORM files. They complete those in LearnBook. And those pre-workshop modules take around 3 hours to complete. There's 2 modules. One goes for around 2 hours. The other one goes for an hour. And that's our sort of main pre-workshop theory. And then they do the face-to-face workshop, which we've got a 1 or a 2 day version of those workshops that take place. And then users do some post-workshop tasks. Now those are fairly extensive. They run for about 15 hours, because in total, we're really offering a 5-day workshop experience where we're offering 1 or 2 face-to-face days, a bit of pre-learning, and then almost like 3 days of post-workshop tasks. And again, that experience of the post-workshop tasks is very much focused more on our educators who this has national accreditation for. So we've got teachers who receive 5 days of accreditation for their national teaching standards, whereas our families might just elect to do the face-to-face workshop and the pre-modules, but don't need to do the 15 hours of post-workshop tasks. But they still have a fully blended learning experience. It's just not as extensive as our teachers' experience. And then once all that's finished, once they've done their pre, their face-to-face, their post, our team leaders who run our workshops, they then mark off completion within the system, and Arlo sends them a completion certificate, which they're always very thrilled to receive at the end of their journey.
Yeah, that's awesome, Craig. And you did highlight a pretty critical point there in the creation of all this e-learning and online activity stuff that applies to both variations of your audience being the teachers and the at-home learners. You've really, kind of ticked off 2 boxes with one series of content being created. And obviously that is another testament to the power of these e-learning activities, and that you have this content created, and now you're well prepared to serve kind of the varying degrees of audience. It's great.
That's right, Ben. And I think during this time of COVID, where we haven't been doing face-to-face workshops, we have still experimented with versions of giving our face-to-face workshops in a webinar environment. So that's something that I sort of haven't articulated on this slide, but and this is our sort of regular user journey in non-COVID times. But in COVID, we have actually been experimenting with giving that face-to-face workshop virtually, just so that's been something that hasn't been lost, because some schools were booked in, and we gave them the option. We said, you can wait until social distancing is back to a regular space, and some of those schools said, no, we'd love to proceed. So we made virtual versions of those workshops that could be delivered virtually to hopefully make as seamless an experience as possible.
That's awesome. Thanks for the additional insight there, Craig.
So this is just a breakdown of a bit more of our what each of the steps actually look like. So this is when participants register for a workshop on our website. This is what the instructions look like that they get from Arlo. So they get the location, they get all the extra information. Down the bottom of this email, there's extra detail around the pre-workshop tasks that they're going to complete. And this, like, it shouldn't be understated just how important this is. Like, we never had a system that could do this as successfully. Now that we've got all this running through Arlo, it's such a seamless, time-saving, cost-saving process just to have all this automated and to be pushed out to our participants, and they can unregister if they'd like to, or they can get extra information from the site. So that goes through to the participants once they've registered. And like I mentioned earlier, when they register for the workshop and they get that info from Arlo, they're simultaneously enrolled in our LearnBook Moodle, our online learning management, that they receive their login details for that. And I'll talk a bit more shortly about the technical aspect of how that works. But that's, again, just been a real game changer for us, that we, in the past, used to have many different systems running that didn't speak to each other. So we'd have to have people manually log in to do a module here, manually register for a workshop here. Now it all just takes place automatically and simultaneously for users, which is great. So they come into this LearnBook space, which has our modules, but they specifically get enrolled in a digital classroom. So they don't just get access to the learning management space, but we author, we call them a digital classroom, and it's a space that contains all the work that they need to complete as part of their workshop. So it contains all the pre-workshop modules that they need to do. It has a description of what the face-to-face workshop will contain, and then it contains all the post-workshop tasks as well. And that's a private space that only participants of that workshop can access. And that's something that they can go back to, and it stays there for forever. So we don't archive that. So participants who've done work, got their certificates, can go away, come back 6 months later and think, I wonder where that thing was, or can I get that certificate again? And the classroom stays in that space.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up there, Craig. And thanks for the nice plug for Arlo there a moment ago. But it's great that you highlighted that integration with LearnBook, being able to, as a user, as a student, complete that registration in one singular form, and then being granted obviously those workshop instructions being distributed automatically on the heels of that through Arlo, and then that corresponding registration getting mapped across to LearnBook and all the necessary logistics, all as simple as that one registration being captured. As far as the admin experience, I'm sure that is a huge relief to hours and hours of admin headaches in times past. So yeah, I'm glad you
Absolutely.
highlighted that for us.
I mean, we've been running this for 18 months now on this particular way of doing it, and it feels like a bit of magic every day that it keeps on doing it. It just, yeah, it's quite a fantastic, and it feels like a very unique, experience. It's something that I can't think of other ways of doing it in such a seamless way, which is why we're doing it, because it's the absolute best system for us.
Wonderful.
And I should say too, I mean, not to waffle too much on that point, but we do feel that we had a pretty unique need, that we had these face-to-face workshops, these online tasks, people registering for things. It was very much a point of success for us to find that you could have these two systems talk to each other in such a seamless way, because it was something we didn't know existed until we started to do some research. So this is when the students log in, the participants log into their digital classroom. They're presented with a welcome screen here that has information again about the workshop, about their pre and post tasks. So this is just a bit of a snapshot of what that looks like. Some of the team were unsure if they'd get that same level of connection through the online space, through the sort of digital platforms that we're running. But when we've been able to explore those ways of directly communicating with students, looking at the tasks they're completing, giving personalized feedback, setting up these individualized spaces, talking to them through the webinar formats, like, it's been really lovely that our most people workshop presenters who just want to cuddle people and get all sort of warm and fuzzy, that has translated really well into the online space, with a few reevaluation of how we actually engage people and make that happen.
It's wonderful to hear. Yeah, like I mentioned, I can't tell you how many times we've heard that is a big aspect of the reluctance. So being able to translate that successfully from face-to-face to online, those people are still able to satisfy that warm and fuzzy feeling, and I'm sure it's reciprocated on the student experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. So this is just a screenshot again of when participants open up a module for their pre-workshop modules, but also to their post-workshop tasks. We author these in Articulate Storyline, and they are SCORM packages that sit on our learning management on LearnBook, that people then can open and work through at their own pace, and they work across multiple devices. So you can start it on your laptop, close it down, catch the train, open up on your iPad, keep going. And yeah, our users give good feedback on the usability and value of these sorts of modules.
Yeah, Craig, and you brought up Articulate. Just to clarify for our listeners who are unfamiliar with Articulate, can you expand real briefly on Articulate Storyline and what you've leveraged that particular software for?
Yeah, absolutely. So Articulate Storyline is a module authoring software. And really, it looks very much like Microsoft PowerPoint, except that the options are more geared towards creating interactive experiences. So rather than slide-based content, you're making slide-based content, but with the user clicking on buttons, doing tasks in interactive activities within that module. So we do two things. One is that we have staff who are trained in using Articulate Storyline, and when I say Articulate Storyline, Articulate is I guess the company, and Storyline is the particular piece of software that's being used. So they open Storyline. We've got staff who are trained in authoring modules in Storyline, but we also get our e-learning provider, our host of LearnBook. They create modules for us as well. So I guess our staff know how to edit modules. They might create little micro learning modules that are a bit smaller in nature and that use some of the assets and content that our bigger modules have been authored by our e-learning partner. So that I guess we've got some skills on our team to author this content, and the software itself is very easy to work with. So we can go in, make changes, update content, but we rely on working in partnership with our e-learning provider to have digital artists to create assets and to create a really good workflow within that sort of user experience space, which we're very pleased to be able to work with someone who can partner with us in such a good way. And this is our I guess once the workshop's finished, they dive back into LearnBook and they do the post-workshop tasks, which can be sort of different versions of tasks. We sometimes have information sheets and activities and ask people to contribute different strategies and supports they're making for their classroom or their home. And then we've got those Storyline school modules that have additional content for people to work through as well. And so we're a fairly automated system. Like we used to have these post-workshop tasks require extensive individual review, marking, feedback from our team leaders, which could take a real sort of, our time sometimes could be almost months later after tasks were finished before we could give feedback to our students, just because we had so many across the country doing these tasks. But now that we're within LearnBook and that we are doing things in a more connected way with our Arlo registrations, that this has been automated to a much greater extent, and to the point that when users complete post-workshop tasks, LearnBook automatically recognizes when they've met that to a certain standard, and can tell Arlo that they have finished and generate a certificate very fast. So instead of us taking months to give feedback, all of this can now take place within a couple of days, which hasn't removed the personal feedback and experience of teachers giving that back, of our team leaders giving feedback to the participants, but it just has removed a lot of the administration that otherwise used to be part of that space. And like I mentioned too earlier, those are nationally accredited. So we've in Australia, we've got our teaching authority. Different states have different standards of accreditation that they need to meet. And within New South Wales and the ACT, there are, I guess, more that we've got some quite rigorous accreditation requirements that we meet within those states that teachers can then use towards their hours, which they very much value, because 5 days goes quite a long way towards the number of hours that they need to get every couple of years.
That's great. And I'm glad you brought this up as well here, that uh, the certificate is distributed on Arlo. So not only does Arlo and LearnBook communicate on the front end of that registration, but also on the heels of that coursework being completed and approved by positive partnerships.
Absolutely, Ben. Yeah, and it's the same for our webinars as well. When a participant comes to a webinar, they have that attendance that is marked off, and they automatically get a certificate, which we never used to be able to offer certificates for webinars because we knew that the administration was going to be too great. So we used to just sort of run webinars quite manually. This was sort of pre-Arlo days, and we wouldn't even offer a certificate because we knew it was too much to do that. But now we're running, like I said, 3 webinars a week, hundreds of users, and we had to have that certificate process automated through Arlo. Just, is a thrill, and it also attracts more users because we advertise up front. You're going to get a certificate. This is all part of the package, and people love to have that as part of their professional learning package at the end.
Sure, great.
Ben, I guess this is just a bit of the sort of technical aspect of the connection between Arlo and LearnBook. To just sort of step through that, is that our users, as I mentioned earlier, they register for our workshop in Arlo, and then the process from there is that Arlo tells LearnBook to create a new user account using the email address that the user registered for with Arlo, and that it brings across particular fields from the Arlo registration into LearnBook. So we might want to capture their name, their role, are they a parent, are they a teacher, what state they're from for their accreditation requirements. So the user enters that into Arlo, and then they don't need to enter that again into a LearnBook system, because the plugin that speaks to Arlo can pull all of that, their email address, create a user registration for them, and then that becomes their login in LearnBook. So they don't need to set up a username in LearnBook. They just log in with the very same email address they used for Arlo, and that's explained in the email that they get. A password is automatically generated for them within LearnBook, and then they can just log in successfully from there. And when we create, as we're authoring the workshop in Arlo, as we're setting that up, we then also create a digital classroom in LearnBook in the back end, and we link those two, so that when the user registers for the workshop, they get into LearnBook, they then see their private classroom in LearnBook that no one else can see, only people who registered for that workshop. And then they log in, they do their work, and when they complete the requirements, it sends a signal back to Arlo saying that they're finished, and that's when they get their certificate. And all of that is very seamless. Like, it's not something that requires us doing a lot of back-end work. The plugin just gets very easily installed in Moodle. It's like a 5-minute job to upload that into the system, get it connected, and then from there, it just sort of works, and LearnBook sends a signal to Arlo every couple of minutes to seek new users to make accounts for. So that just happens automatically across the day.
Yeah, that's an important note to point out there, and thanks for the really succinct, high level kind of synopsis of that relationship between Arlo and LearnBook you've got here. And you're absolutely right in that data is always being mapped across between Arlo and LearnBook. So multiple times throughout the hour, more than likely at the least, often multiple times throughout the day, that Arlo data is going to reflect exactly what's taking place on the LearnBook side. So obviously, as you have that audience who's tuning into positive partnerships from throughout the world, Arlo is kind of constantly pulling that data. And if you log in at any time of day, you're going to get a pretty accurate, up-to-date picture of what's happening. And it's super cool that the way that this plugin works, really that end user experience the only interaction that they have with Arlo is that initial registration, and unbeknownst to them. And then everything else is happening on LearnBook, but obviously that communication is pretty constant between the two platforms on behind the scenes. So great for pointing this out here, Craig. Thank you.
Yeah, great, Ben. So, I mean, that's sort of, I guess, where we've been up to with our work. Like I said, our recent work, as we did talk a bit more about, is that, yeah, our sort of COVID work has very much ramped up our webinars. Some of the virtual learning has very much, like I said, gone from monthly webinars to 3 times a week. Now, I mean, post COVID, we're not keen to really reduce that because we love the engagement that we're getting. We've got a whole new audience of people who are tuning in weekly, and the same people are coming back, saying, can't wait for the next webinar. They're meeting people that they know within the chat box, and they're chatting. So we've formed all sorts of new community partnerships and relationships between users that more frequent content has been able to establish in ways that our monthly webinars never did. So yeah, I think we'd be missing a great opportunity if we didn't keep that going. And like I said, our team has really gotten into the flow and see the enjoyment of doing that now. So it's something that we're going to sort of keep running with, and our user numbers have really gone up. And now that I think now that we're in more people's minds too, like schools have always accessed our things from time to time, but I don't think knew just how much we could offer as part of the full scope of our online learning. So we've got a lot more schools who are including our work as part of their training packages to teachers and teacher aides and families. And all the time we're getting contacted about ways now to offer different versions of that to schools. So yeah, that's something that, like I said, this sort of period has really given us more exposure and access in ways that we didn't anticipate before all of this took place.
Well, as we kind of alluded to earlier, Craig, I hope, and I'm sure at Positive Partnerships, it sounds like you guys are holding the same hope, and that this has just been the tip of the iceberg for you guys, and that growth continues to really take off, and that international exposure, that overall engagement, to the, I think it's super cool that you guys have been able to kind of facilitate and foster those relationships that are kind of naturally occurring. And, oh, hey, there's my buddy in the chat box. And, obviously that, that networking that is typically kind of perceived to be reserved for the face-to-face is 100% taking place in your live online platform. So that's absolutely fantastic. Again, we're really excited to see where Positive Partnership goes from here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. Which, as you say, I mean, this is our future, that we, this is hopefully just going to keep on growing. We're really excited once we do go back to face-to-face workshops, that we will not drop off all these amazing hybrid blended learning experiences that we've been able to establish. For us, returning to face-to-face is just going to give us a lot more opportunity to give options to people, to connect face-to-face workshops in virtual ways that we've never done before. We've got a whole bank of some very exciting little innovations that we're keen to start experimenting with as this space keeps growing. And yeah, so it's been a really interesting time. Lots of new ideas being thrown around, and we're very pleased to have been able to get to the point that we have with the online systems that have allowed all this to happen, because all of this would have just been lots of hopes in the air if we didn't have real technical systems to help it all actually come to be real. So that's obviously what we needed, and we're very pleased at how it's all worked out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure a lot of our folks that are tuning in and listening and viewing this discussion here, Craig, are finding that inspiration that it's time to pull the trigger on this online platform for learning and discovery for prospective students. Yeah, the success that you guys are seeing, the message that Positive Partnership is sharing, it is inspirational. It's great to see that you guys have found such success with this.
Absolutely, Ben.
All right, guys, just looking at the time, and we're already at the 45-minute marks. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the content thus far as discussed with Craig. And as mentioned earlier, we've got Paul from Parallel Project hopping on here in a bit, but I just want to preface and let you guys know that it looks like we'll more than likely be exceeding that initial 1 hour mark. So if you have to run, if you've got another meeting coming up, feel free to depart as needed, and we'll certainly send you all the recording once we've got the webinar wrapped up, and you guys can revisit that at a later point anyways. Okay. I think we've got Paul on the line now, dialing in from the UK. Yes, I've got some confirmation in the background that we do have Paul here. So without further ado, as mentioned, I'd like to introduce you guys to Paul Naybour, coming from the UK, representing Parallel Project training. Let's go ahead and jump straight in. Paul, go ahead and give us an introduction to Parallel and what your business does and how you've used blended learning to see success over the years.
Okay, we're a project management training company, as it says in the name, but we focus on the APM, which is the professional body for qualifications in the UK. So you've probably heard of the PMI, the sort of like Project Management Institute, big American outfit. We tend to focus on the UK version of that. So it's a little bit smaller, a bit more niche maybe. So we focus on just their qualifications. So they don't do training. We're certified to do training, and then we put people through their exams. So there's sort of like a partnership between us.
Very good. Yeah, thanks for the introduction there, Paul. And we're definitely excited to hear a little bit further about your business and how you've really kind of leaned into the blended learning aspect and approach to delivering course content to your registrants. So let's get down into it.
So what we thought was, how would you design a blended learning approach? And we came up with this parallel learning system. We first of all wrote a book, which I've probably got a copy of the book in front of me. Oh, here it is here. So we wrote this massive book here. So basically we put everything you need to know about the course in a book. So you could just learn the course from the book. And then we said, well, how can we complement that book? So I was asking my brother. My brother said, what about these podcast things? They're really popular. So we recorded some podcasts, and we had about 1.5 million downloads of those podcasts. So
that's awesome.
you just grab. I think that's a big tip. You know, you just grab them off Spotify or iTunes or Google Play Store. They're free. Yeah, my business partner keeps saying, well, if I got £1 for each one, I'd be a happy man. You know,
yeah,
and then
it's unfortunate Spotify doesn't pay a pound per download, right?
yeah, I'd be really happy then. I'd be just sitting on the beach, you know. And then e-learning. So actually, we've changed the e-learning system a few times, and we now have people like what we do. And then we thought, well, we'll do some classroom stuff, but actually, we ended up doing more classroom stuff than blended. So we've always done a bit of blended, but it was always like 5% or 10% of the business. And a couple of clients, some of the big international consultancies said, yeah, we should be offering international programs, and therefore we'll do this blended learning program. And some of them started around 2009. But really it was a big growth curve from there, really. The Association of Project Management, the people whose exams we do, got chartered status, so you can now be a chartered project manager. So that's been a bit of a growth curve really for us. And so we go all the way from what they say is chartered, from starting your career to chartered, you know. So that's been quite good.
Okay, well I appreciate the all the context there, Paul. Let's go ahead and flip to the next slide and kind of proceed through your story.
Right, so you asked me to describe the journey of a learner will typically see. So what they'll see is this is the home page, and so these are the 4 levels from starter all the way up to charter, and the different qualifications that you can do at those different levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're just going to look at this level 1 qualification. This is sort of typical for someone who's new to a project. You know, they've done a couple of projects and they like it and they want to get going. So from £325, including the exam. So that includes the learning and the exam and all that sort of stuff. So it's not cheap. And I think on the next slide, we're going to look at, this is the page that you then go to. So you've now got a choice of either a virtual classroom or online learning. This used to be classroom, face to face. So we had a big panic change that to virtual classroom.
And you're saying used to be as in prior to COVID, is that right?
Prior to COVID, like,
Yeah.
yes, in March. So we had so it's a bit odd now because it says virtual and online.
Sure.
But it's good enough for now.
Well, and we can dive into the differences between virtual classroom and online learning as well.
Yeah, virtual classroom is led like we are now, like a tutor, and you can ask questions, have conversation. And online learning is self-paced study, really.
Sure. Yeah,
So then we were talking about the price difference between those two. So we are doing, these are our list prices. So 325 for a distance learning course and 775 for the old 2-day classroom. So they're not cheap, but there's quite a big price differential between what we were doing as a 2-day classroom and what we were doing as distance learning. And I'm really interested to say, how much would you be prepared to pay for a tutor-led virtual course? So like on Zoom, if you can buy the course self-paced for £325, what's the extra value of having someone like me guide you through that course on Zoom or whatever? So,
well, I think, Paul, just given some of the conversations I've had with clients and the response to COVID, and obviously the inability to run face-to-face courses, you've kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of a primary concern that a lot of business owners have in terms of what they feel like their students are missing out on. Yeah, so it's great to see that you're kind of thinking in that direction in terms of how do we continue to offer what the students are looking for.
So I think it depends what people want out of the learning. So if you're instilling knowledge leading to an exam like we are, we've measured the stats for years now, and actually the blended learning, especially when it's modular, gets a better result than the classroom intensive course. So quite often we'll spread a blended learning over 6 to 8 weeks, do it in bite-sized bits, so we can mark their homework and give them feedback. It's more like a program, whereas a classroom 5-day course, by Wednesday they're usually flagging a little bit, and the pass rates are almost as good. The experience feedback isn't as well. Actually, no. The people who do it, they like that, extended interaction with the trainer, the tutor, really.
Sure.
So I don't think it's necessarily worse. I mean, if you were doing trying to behave role play, that's going to be more difficult, isn't it? But what we do is we impart that book. So
right. Well, yeah, you're absolutely right there in that it is two kind of completely different experiences, and really depends on I think what the students are after. That obviously the networking and the ability to have that face-to-face interaction with the tutor or the class instructor.
Yeah. It's not going to be work for leadership and behavioral change, I don't think, as well. But.
Sure.
So
real quickly here, Paul. Obviously, the COVID has been a massive catalyst for people shifting and the market shifting to the availability for consuming courses online, and whether that be through virtual classroom or through self-paced and e-learnings. Can you talk about briefly, and you've already kind of alluded to some of this, but the overall COVID impact to your business, and ultimately your decision to shift away from face-to-face courses entirely for 2020?
We didn't have a choice to stop face-to-face.
Sure.
But I think we then went down 65% in that first month drop. But actually we bounced back up to, we've probably doubled where we were in that first month. So that first March bit was very chaotic. Not a lot happened. We didn't actually cancel anything. We managed to convert everything that we had in the books to online. But I would say now we're back up at sort of 70% of where we were.
And that's 70% of the entire business,
Pre-COVID,
not just not
Yeah.
just the online. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fantastic testament to how the market is responding, and you know, a lot of these consumers are being proactive in their ability to pivot and embrace that pivot to obviously a very different consumption method.
And it's a different value proposition. I think it's we've had lots of bookings today, and I'll tell you why in a minute.
Yeah, very good.
It's to do with price. It's to do with that question: how much would you be prepared to pay for a virtual course over e-learning? So while that was £775, we've chopped it back to below £500. And the level 2 course, the one up here, we've chopped back to 1,000. And I've spoke to lots of people that said, "Oh, it's less than 1,000. That means I don't need to get authority from my director. My boss can sign it off."
That's a nice to know from parallel projects perspective.
So that I never thought of that, because it used to be 1,600, which is a big amount of money. And getting it below 1,000, as all of a sudden people have gone, "Oh, yes, I can do it." You know, so it's back to that price elasticity. You know, you're doing theory courses. You know, as they reduce the price, what's the elasticity? How does the volume go up as the price comes down? So we're just stretching these. We're doing some experiments with these discounts at the moment, just to see how the sales goes up as the price comes down, and what's the point at which is most economic to, you know, if we can get 8 or 9 or 10 people, you know, for a 2-day course, that'll do, because there's no cost.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Paul, and that's kind of exactly where I want to lead the conversation to next. Is obviously adjusting that price is going to have a direct impact on the overall volume of sales that you guys are seeing. Are you seeing that impact take place pretty much as soon as you adjust that price?
We're only 2 weeks. Last week we chopped it.
Okay.
So we did sell a few. You know, we were doing reasonably well, but since we've taken it to 40% off, it has significantly improved. So
yeah, that's wonderful. I think that's a big question on, you know, a lot of players' minds is, you know, how much of an impact does price ultimately have on that consumption? And
so
then Oh, go ahead, Paul.
So we thought, if you can buy the course Distance Learning Self-Study for 325, then if you have to pay 465, it's another £150 to have a tutor-led course. But we haven't got to book a venue. We haven't got to put a trainer in a hotel. We haven't got to travel up there, which is quite expensive, you know. So there are a lot of fixed costs that have come out. So,
yeah, sure. And then as far as overall class capacity, do you guys hold the same kind of maximum registrants per face-to-face that you've transferred over to live online? Have you cut that max in half, or what does that look like?
So I talked about the consultancy. We've done it for a long time. They'll have 20 in a class online, whereas we wouldn't go above 12 face-to-face. And that's because you can break it up, so you're not doing it as an intensive module. So there are more lectures and then homework. So online tends to be more one way, I think. And then you have to evaluate through homework and assignments. So that's how you get the feedback, is through homework and assignments. So one of my people I know in the industry has been talking about some webinars he's been on with 150 people, and they've been brilliant, you know, because they've had like world leading speakers. You know,
that's a big number to manage, 150 people. Jeez.
Yeah, but they have multiple facilitators and they break them into breakout rooms. And so I don't know what the model is. You know, people were saying that you know, you should limit it at 12 or 15, but I don't know. I think it depends how clever we are in the way we design the programs. It's all about how do we monitor and evaluate the learning, you know, and that's not just by the number. It's by so I mark masses of homework. I've got it all down here. Like the groups I do are 20. This is all the marking I've done. I spend hours marking all their homework, and then I get the feedback on their homework. You know, well, that's really high quality feedback for our guys, because they want us to pass an exam. So long as they get individual feedback on the homework, then it's my capacity to mark homework that limits the number, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think one of the key elements in determining the overall course's success, the student's success, is how are these courses facilitated.
Yes.
So that's a great bit of insight there, Paul. Is obviously leveraging the technology, the tools that we have at our disposal to that full potential. You mentioned something about the breakout rooms and multiple facilitators, multiple instructors, being able to guide these respective rooms through that particular conversation, and then closing the loop through that follow-up engagement and overall evaluation. Yeah, great stuff there, Paul. Thanks for that.
I think it took me about 3 years to learn to deliver online, because when you ask a question, you have to leave time for people to think and respond. Whereas the temptation is just to fill the gap. If it goes quiet, you just talk and talk, but you have to pace what you say, and you have to condense it to be really simple, because, every word matters. You don't watch the TV and they go off talking about some random story.
Sure.
They focus on the point, so it is different. It is a different style, really.
Yeah, I think it's a overall entirely different experience for both student and administrator, right? Similar to some of the other concerns that we addressed earlier, transferring that overall experience from traditional face-to-face to live online, and what is the best way to do it. Those are key questions that I know our client base is mulling over right now, so thanks for sharing that.
So
okay.
We wanted to talk about the journey as well, didn't we?
Yes, please.
So this is our journey. So they register on Moodle, on Arlo here. Actually, I noticed got this in the wrong place, actually. So the first step is they register on Arlo. We then set them up on Moodle, so they get e-learning access automatically through. So Arlo is very good. It fires off that e-learning registration straight away. And then in the post, we print out this study guide and send it to them. So that comes as a printed book. And then here, they then have a choice of what they do. So some people like the videos, some people like the podcast, some people like to read the book. So there's a whole range of different learning styles in there. And that's what we've learned. Different people. Some people rave about the podcast. Some people hate them.
That's brilliant, Paul. I love that you've incorporated, obviously in the classroom, it's much easier to facilitate, different learning styles and cater your instruction to those particular learning styles, and transferring that over to in this capacity, offering, how do you want to consume that content?
Yeah.
That's such a brilliant aspect. I love that.
So some people like to read, some people like to watch video. So it meets those different learning styles. And then they have the option, a classroom course, or a 2-day webinar-led course with a trainer, or self-study. So they can skip out step 5 altogether. And then we always have a mock exam, because it's a formal qualification. So we always do a mock exam, which we mark, or if it's multi-guess, we can get the computer to mark it for us, and then they do a full exam. So it's quite a sophisticated. There's too many steps in it, really. I'd like it to be simpler, but a lot of that is to do with the exam, really, and getting people ready for an exam. So this is really simple. This is just what the Moodle page looks like. So I just thought I'd show you. So basically each section there's a video here that you can play. That's sort of what we've ended up doing. Podcasts that you can download, and then quizzes. So we have little quick quizzes that again, people love them. I hate them because you have to get the answer. The problem with quizzes is the wrong answers. It's never the right answer. It's getting the wrong answers. They're wrong enough. They're actually wrong, but not too wrong, So.
And do you mandate that the quizzes be completed and submitted, Paul?
No, we don't mandate them, and we can skip round any bit of the video you like. So this isn't a playlist. It's like a YouTube playlist, so you can skip forward and back. So they're only like 90-second slots of topic. So you can do a topic in 90 seconds, then you can flick to the next one and flick to the next one and flick, or go back, or whatever you like.
I'm curious there, Paul, with the quizzes being optional, do you
Yeah.
see pretty substantial engagement? And with that engagement, do you see relatively high
We
success
don't
rates?
measure it, actually. We don't measure the engagement in the quizzes.
I'm sure you've got to be
Really?
capable of doing some reporting internally on Moodle to
Yeah, we have, but we don't really. We monitor the exam pass rates.
I guess that's all that matters, right?
So at the end of the day, if we're getting sort of 80% of the people through the level 2 and 98% of the people through the level 1, then we're happy, really, and the delegates are happy.
Sure.
Yeah. So if it was I suppose if it was a compliance type course, health and safety compliance or sort of first aid type course, then the quizzes would be more important to us. But these are just like learning aids for us. They're not really part of that monitoring evaluation.
Sure. Yeah, I would be curious to know what that engagement and success looks like, though.
Well, everyone
Curious.
generally passes because we let them do the quizzes as many times as they like.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And the quizzes have got feedback in them. So when I have looked occasionally, and usually that people have got every question right. And of course, the answers are in the back of the book as well. So you can just sit with a book open. And so that's an important point, actually. All the same pictures are in the slide. So every picture that's in this book is also in the slide deck on the course. And the quizzes in the book are the same as the quizzes in the online.
Yeah, that's fantastic construction, and parallel is the best.
So you can turn the page, so you can sit with the book and turn the page, and you're seeing the same pictures in the same order. So that's why the quizzes are 100%, isn't it? Because the answers are in the last chapter. I wondered why I'd never looked.
I love that you're giving your students the benefit of the doubt there, Paul.
Yeah. Well, that's not how they're evaluated.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, appreciate you giving us a little bit of a cross section of what the Moodle backend looks like. Let's go ahead and proceed here.
I thought you'd be interested in the systems, how it all works. So the website is just basically brochureware now. Yeah. So we used to have a really complicated website that had too much stuff in it. It used to do all the e-learning and orders and the bookings and everything. So actually, Arlo let us offload all that work onto Arlo. So that sends out all the registrations and meeting rooms. Interestingly, we used to switch over to virtual. We just changed the meeting room from a real meeting room to a virtual meeting room, and it worked.
Yeah.
So instead of sending you're in the thing, you have like directions how to get to the venue. We just put the meeting room URL in there.
Yeah, that's exactly what we've kind of been stressing to our client base, so that we're concerned about transferring from face-to-face to live online. We can actually, quote unquote, cheat the system and create a virtual venue, exactly as you're alluding to there.
It's exactly what we did. So, because I did think about converting them to webinars and rebooking everyone, but no, we just switched the venue. And that was quite a communications process, actually, going out to people and saying, we are still running the courses. They are going to be virtual, blah, blah, blah. We phoned up everybody personally and said, are you happy? What do you want to do? Do you want to defer or come? And our sales guy was fantastic in doing that, So Moodle's good.
I'm glad you highlighted that hack was incredibly successful for you guys.
Moodle seems quite good. We quite like Moodle. It's going to do everything. We probably use about 1% of its capacity. And then we love the link to Xero as well. So synchronizing the payments across to Xero is really good. Bits we're working on. We have to order the books by hand. So we want to get the data, the addresses out so we can order the books electronically, because those come from a distributor. So that's the next thing to work out. Adobe, we managed to hack it that way, like you said, and then we'd really love to figure out how we can integrate in the exam bookings as well, because that's another manual process. So our philosophy really is streamline as much process out as possible. Get rid of as much paperwork as possible.
That's really the name of the game, right? The more paperwork that you can remove from the equation, the more time that you guys have to focus on, delivering the product.
Yeah, especially in a virtual, because it is about content, so the more we can do that, the better.
Sure. Yeah, great. Thanks, Paul.
You
All
asked me
right.
about
So
ROI.
this is what everybody's curious about, Paul. How much are you
We used
making with this stuff?
not enough. So we used to have quite a large-ish admin team, and we've actually managed to downsize that significantly. So that's
And is that attributable to these
Arlo.
streamlined systems? Yep.
Yeah, Arlo. We used to have lots of bits of paper with lots of lists of names of people on, and lots of Excel spreadsheets. Trying to keep them all lined up, and Arlo basically just supported us in doing that, really. And it's great to have all the data in one place. And we did see a significant improvement in conversion as well. So I think because the booking process was significantly easier than the e-commerce solution we'd basically bodged together ourselves previously. I think we were seeing, I forget the numbers now, 20 or 30% improvement. So if we came on board in about September, so we had sort of 6 months of good data, and then post-COVID, it's been a bit of a difficult to compare whether that conversion is maintained or not. So
yeah. So moving through these bullet points here, Paul. So you came on in September. So you guys have been with us for less than a year.
yeah,
And that 50K on the admin cost. So since September.
yeah, that's probably an annualized cost.
Sure, that's really incredible. And then the improved conversion, that's interesting as well. What is that? Just the ease of booking, the ease of.
I think it's the ease of searching and browsing dates. Okay. We redesigned our whole website up from the bottom up as well. So these pages here, that's an Arlo generated page. So that's quite nice for, I felt like looked quite good compared to our old page. So once we did Arlo for about 4 months, and then we decided we were going to commit to rebuilding the website based on it, because we did the standard WordPress plugin at first, but this design is a bit better, a bit more integrated. So,
and you've seen that web integration pay dividends, obviously, in funneling potential registrants to the right.
So we came on board in
classroom.
September. We launched this in December, Christmas time, which was difficult. And then we had the whole blooming Brexit thing in January. We had an election in December. We had Brexit in January. We had COVID in February. So we've got no idea.
It's been a big year. Yeah, no kidding. Well, hopefully we return to some semblance of normalcy for the latter
God
half
knows
of the
what
year.
normal
Paul,
is. I think it's like going through startup again.
Yeah,
So the
sure.
future, I'm worried about people like LinkedIn Learning. I'm sure you've looked at LinkedIn Learning.
Yep.
They offer loads of stuff, and actually we mirrored our videos off their style because I think the way they do that learning is quite good. So I think that's a challenge really, because they have very high quality content. So I think staying ahead of those guys is going to be a challenge. The other issue is, what's the price point for virtual? How much would you pay? If you can buy a LinkedIn Learning course for $40 a month, how much would you pay for me taking you through it? Because that's what you don't get off LinkedIn Learning.
Yeah, and I think that is the ultimate value proposition, right? Is that's what's going to attract students away from LinkedIn Learning and that style of delivery to somebody like you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I wonder whether we'll go to subscription models as well in the future. So we've got these stages 1, 2, 3, 4 from starter to charter. I just think when we've got that whole flow working and lots of content, and we focus on content development, then at some stage I think a monthly subscription model of £30 or £40 a month for our market might work quite well. So
and obviously that subscription model is geared towards the self-paced, the e-learning activities.
I think you could have a silver, bronze, gold. So you'd have a basic, you get all the self-paced stuff for the £30 a month. And then if you want to buy an optional bolt-on extra, a webinar when you've got an exam coming up or something like that, then maybe that would work as well. So it's about making people sticky, isn't it? It's about building that community of practice. So I think that might come. Rather than charging people £380 for a course, we'll charge them £30 a month for 20 years or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. No brainer there. Okay. Well, let's, I think we've got one more slide to make our way through here, Paul.
Oh, you asked for some tips. Podcasts are dead easy to make and they're very popular. I think video is better than school. Virtual delivery, in my view, can be just as good as classroom. You just have to slow down and give people, it's just different. The question is we've repeated that question, and just streamline everything. And we spend a lot on SEO and web development, because if you're not anywhere on Google, you're not anywhere on, especially for
people's
virtual
minds.
Courses.
Sure.
Yeah, especially for virtual courses, because there's not that relationship with a trainer. Geography no longer matters.
Yeah, it's irrelevant outside of time zones and that implication. But when you're looking at self-paced stuff, it's completely irrelevant. Yeah, that's a great point. So thanks again to Paul Naybour from Parallel Project Training. Obviously bringing a ton of experience, 10, 12 years of blended learning delivery experience, and still looking to iterate, still looking to constantly be in kind of that startup mentality. So we definitely appreciate the insights and experience that you bring to the table and shared with our attendees and extended attendees today, Paul. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I hope people found it useful and interesting. And we do appreciate the support we get from Arlo, actually. All the stuff you put out has been really helpful. So thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, that about does it for today's installment of our continuing webinar series. Thank you again for everybody for showing up. A special thank you to both Craig and Paul from their respective businesses and countries and sharing their user stories with us. And hopefully you all found their blended learning experiences to be insightful. And we'd love to kind of talk to you guys about next steps here. So if you are new to Arlo, we'd love to walk you through, coordinate for one of our sales consultants to provide you guys with a demo. We'll certainly be providing contact information and the ability for you to schedule that demo if that is how you would like to proceed. Also feel free to hop onto arlo.co, start a free trial. The platform is available for you guys to use fully fledged for a 14-day period, free of charge. So feel free to check that out. If you guys are existing Arlo customers, and this is something that you'd like to proceed, or you'd just like to have a general catch up with either myself or your customer success manager, Ezra, we'll be distributing some calendar booking links. Feel free to hop on and schedule some time with either one of us. And we'd love to kind of talk to you guys about next steps. How do we incorporate blended learning at your respective business? We've got an upcoming webinar here in a couple of weeks' time. We're going to be diving a little bit further into blended learning framework. We've got another exciting guest speaker representing LearnBook and the exciting integration that we've got there. So look for the registration link to come through in some webinar follow-up emails. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, we will be distributing the recording. Feel free to revisit and kind of, if you have any questions come up on the heels of that, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And as both Craig and Paul have alluded to, and now is the best time to move to blended learning. Let's talk about next steps and getting LearnBook and or Moodle plugged into your system and get things underway. Thanks again for joining us today, guys.